Hello soulmates, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be teaching you how to cut and also how to sew this simple bubu gown. So this bubu gown is a plain and pattern style. From the inspiration, they use a plain material for the larger part of the style and Ankara for the design. But for me, I'm using a Kampala for the larger part of the gown while a plain material for the neck, the hand and the pocket area. So without wasting much time, let's get right into this video. Welcome back guys. So for the larger part of this style, you'll be needing about 2 to 3 yards of your fabric, while for the smaller parts you'll be needing half yard. So in case you are using a mikado or a pattern material, just know that you'll be needing 2 to 3 yards. But for me, I was able to use 2 yards for what I recreated, but if you want it bigger than my own, you can just buy 3 yards of your fabric. So now I've folded my fabric into 4. That means that I'll be cutting both the back and the front together at the same time. So you fold your fabric into 4. Then the first thing I want to do is to measure half inch here, which will serve as my joining at the shoulder area. Then you measure your desired length. So I'm working with length 43 and I added about 2 inches for my hemming allowance at the lower part. So the next thing you would be doing now is to go ahead to this upper part. Then you measure your shoulder measurement divided by 2 across like this. You measure your shoulder measurement divided by 2. My shoulder is 16, so 16 divided by 2, that's 8. So the next thing I want to do is to measure about 9 inches here for the sleeve, but take note that there will still be an extension on 4 inches to this sleeve. So altogether the sleeve will be about 13 inches, that is the 9 plus the extra 4 inches. So the next thing I want to do is to go down by 1.5 inches here. This is just to make a shoulder slope, like a slope around this area. So the next thing I'll be doing is to measure my sleeve opening. So at this point here, you measure your sleeve opening. So for my sleeve opening, I'm using 10 inches. Then I'm adding 1 inches for the joining allowance at the side and half inch for the joining allowance at this shoulder area. So altogether I'll be measuring 11.5 inches, just like so this. Now after locating this point, you go ahead and connect it to the one we've measured earlier at the upper part. So you just roll it like this. So the next thing to do is to measure your bust length at this point. As you can see that I'm leaving half inch at this upper part, that's for the joining. So you measure your accurate bust length. So for the wideness of your bubu, you choose the highest measurements between your bust and your hip. Most times the hip is always higher than the bust, sometimes is the bust, why sometimes they are always equal. But for the measurement I'm working with, the bust and the hip is the same, so I just choose one. Then you add your ease allowance and your sewing allowance. So this ease allowance depends on what your client wants. If your client wants this to be very big, you use ease allowance of about 5 to 6 inches. But if your client doesn't want it very big, you can just use 2 to 3 inches. Then you add your sewing allowance. Aside from the ease allowance, you add your sewing allowance. So whatsoever everything is at this point, with your ease allowance and your sewing allowance, you measure it, then you transfer it downward like that. So you keep marking the same thing all over till you get to the end of your gown. As you can see that the point was meeting with the line from the sleeve area. So I'm trying to check what I measured here to make the correction of the line I'm rolling. Then you just connect it like this towards the sleeve area. So there should be a connection between the sleeve and the side, so you just curve it just like this so that the sewing can be easy. So guys, let's move to our neckline. So for this neckline, I'll be measuring 3.5 inches wideness by 2 inches depth. This neckline will be for the back because the front neckline is very different from the back, so every adjustment will be made on the front neckline later. So I'm using 3.5 inches by 2 inches depth for the back neckline. So that is what I'm using. Just connect it like this, then you cut it out. So you go ahead and cut out the neckline and also every other part. So the next thing I'll be doing is to remove one of this. So the one will be for the back and the other one will be for the front. So for the back, I'm measuring 1.5 inches inward. So I measured 1 at first, but I'm increasing it to 1.5 because I want the design at the neckline to be about 2 inches. If you want it to be 1.5 inches, so you measure 1 at that side. So depending on your neck depth, so I'm using about 9 inches neck depth. I'm using 9 inches. You can use 8 inches if you don't want your neckline to be very low. You can just use 8 inches or 7.5. So the next thing I will do here is to also measure about 3/4. So I measured about 3/4 inches here, like 3/4, almost 1. I measured it there. So I'll be connecting this 1.5 inches I measured at this point down to this part here. I hope you get what I'm doing. So I'm connecting it like this. So this looks like a V neckline, but it is not a V because there's still space at the side, which is the 3/4 inches. So you go ahead and you cut this out. After cutting it out, we'll go ahead and open it up. So it's now time for us to cut the neck design we'll be fixing here. So you know the length of this neck design, you measure what you have here. So whatever you have there, you can just add excess of about 2 inches so that if it is more than enough, you can cut it out. So I want the design to be 2 inches, but I'll be cutting 2.5 inches on fold so that when I sew with ½ inch, I will have 2.5 at the end. I hope you understand. So this wideness of this design is 2.5 inches on fold. So when you open it up, it is 5 inches, and the length for me, when I went measured the neckline, it was 10. So I just added 2 inches extra. As you can see, there is excess at the lower part. So I'll just cut out the excess. So I'm trying to locate where the sewing will end. So the sewing should end ½ inch after this line here. After the V neckline, you see that line, that straight line at that V area, it should be ½ inch below that line. ½ inch below. Make sure it is ½ inch below that line. So the sewing must stop ½ inch below the line. So if you want to mark it, you can just mark it so that when you are sewing, you know where to stop. And the next thing I'll be doing is to also pin this down. So I'll be pinning this down so that it doesn't move. So guys, if you are watching up to this extent and you haven't liked this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe. If you don't know what to comment, just drop your favorite emoji. Thank you. So I went ahead to pin, then I'll be sewing up to this point. So now this is my pocket and I'll just be telling you the measurement for this pocket. So this pocket, the length, that is the height after folding, as you can see that I folded it in. So the height is about 11 inches while the wideness is about 10 inches. So together with the sewing allowance and everything, it should be 14 inches by 12 inches. So we are folding 2 inches at the upper part, 1 inches at every other side. I hope you understand. So that's all about the pocket. I'll also go ahead and sew the pocket at the upper part, then also sew this neckline. So this back also, I'll use a bias tape to turn it. So I went ahead to sew this and I'm removing my pins right now. So I'll show you how it was done. So I'm flipping this to the back. I'm flipping it to the back. Then I'll be notching this part, but I want to use my chalk to notch it first before I cut the notching. So you notch it diagonally like this, then you cut. Make sure the cutting is no more than ½ inches, ½ inches inward. That is, it must stop at that sewing area where the sewing ended. So the notching should end there too. So this is what it should look like. So when you flip this over, it will go inside seamlessly without any problem, and the ½ inches we went down with will be the folding at this straight part of the V neckline. So I went ahead to iron this down and it is looking very neat and clean. So when you flip it to the back, you can see the ½ inches. Then you go ahead and just sew like this together with this design. You sew, as you can see, the ½ inches there. You follow the ½ inches line that's been ironed already. Then you go ahead and you just sew. So if you know the sewing will move, it will shift. You can just pin before you sew. So I went ahead to sew, and this is what mine looks like, and it looks really neat. So I'm trimming this excess at the shoulder area. I'm just trimming it over, and this is my back body. So I'll go ahead and join this with half inch on both sides. I'll join with half inch. So now when you are done joining, for the sleeve we'll be adding this extension. So this is 9 inches without folding. So when it is folded, I have 4.5, and when I sew with half inch, I have 4. So the length of this is the length of the sleeve opening. Then I went ahead to iron my stay to it just to make it thick. So this is the sleeve opening. So for the length, you can just measure what you have at this part here. Then you cut the same as the plain fabric. Then you go ahead and just sew with half inch. So I went ahead to sew this part with half inch, and this is what I have. So you can also top stitch on this fabric, on the main fabric. You can top stitch to make it neat. So now I'm trying to locate where my pocket will be, and for you to locate that, you just measure your half length, locate that half length point, then you go down by 2 inches below your half length measurement. 2 inches below your half length measurement, and this pocket should be in between one side of the front bodies. That when you divide these front bodies into two, the pocket should be in between one side of the front bodies. As you can see, I left few space at the side of the gown because I don't want it to enter into the side seam, that is the side joining of this gown. But it is not crossing over, it is not at the middle of this gown, but it is by the side of this gown. So I'm pinning my pockets down because I've already ironed the sewing allowance inside, so it is easy for me to just pin it down, and I'll just sew on the edge. So after sewing, this is what I have. You can still shift your pocket towards inside a little bit, maybe like 2 inches after the sewing allowance at the side. That will be fine. So I went ahead to sew the side of this gown, and I've also hemmed the lower part. So what I'm just doing now is to notch this curvy side of the armhole so that when I'm flipping it over, it can flip out perfectly, and when I iron it, there is no bulging at that part, so it will flip out perfectly. So this is what I have after ironing my Boubou gown. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't liked, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.